Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey everybody, how you doing? It is Friday, June 19th, 2020. That makes it, in fact, Juneteenth, and I didn't have that in my morning post over at the Daily Kos, and that's because Donald Trump didn't make it famous enough, I guess, for me to remember to do that. After all this controversy, I still didn't remember to do it. And, well, you know, that's, I guess, part of the problem, and sorry about that. I probably should have included that. Even Donald Trump was, one, capable of learning about Juneteenth, although I understand in the big interview that everyone's talking about, but that was conducted by the Wall Street Journal, apparently, and so therefore is protected by a paywall, and so I haven't read it, although I'm sure there are plenty of reports that we can lean on to get the juiciest excerpts. Certainly Twitter has done that, and I guess among the things that was revealed in the interview, and they published their transcript of the interview, and all those things that made me wish I had access to the Wall Street Journal's publications. I guess it's not enough of it is about coronavirus for them to make it free. But I guess he takes a net positive away from his having initially scheduled his big Tulsa rally for today. It is instead tomorrow. But scheduling the rally for Juneteenth, his big takeaway, he's an endlessly positive and upbeat guy, except for the fact that he's so negative about almost everything else. Endlessly upbeat about himself, of course, and considers himself to have done a good thing here by initially scheduling his rally for Juneteenth because he made Juneteenth famous. Nobody had ever heard of it, of course. That's his code for I never heard of it, and that's all you really need to know about him. So he figures no one has ever heard of it, and I guess during the interview he asked around and said, this was actually kind of funny, no one had ever heard of it, I'm the one that made it famous, and you can all thank me for that. But he quizzed various aides who were standing around, I guess, and said, you never heard of it, right? You never heard of it, you never heard of it, nobody ever heard of it, right? And then I guess one of the staffers who was there actually points out, without actually directly contradicting him and saying, yes, of course I've heard of it. You've heard of it too. We've all heard of it because, but she tells the story that, the White House put out a statement for Juneteenth last year. Don't you remember? I mean, it was probably a presidential proclamation. I will say this. Lots of presidential proclamations go out, sometimes under the president's signature, and sometimes the president, even when it's not President Trump, doesn't actually sign the presidential statements on things like that. But it was kind of funny to hear that it was reported right in front of him, the aide saying, yeah, we put out a statement on Juneteenth last year. We've put out a statement for all 3 years that you've been in the White House. And he's incredulous. The Trump White House put out a statement on Juneteenth? Okay, well, good. He's, pat himself on the back a little bit more. And I thought that was rather remarkable. Probably you did too. Don't know if you had heard that story. I'm looking at my calendar, which I usually depend upon for notification that some sort of holiday is coming up. I will say this. I guess I have a racist calendar or a racially insensitive calendar. I don't want to pile too much on the Cambridge line put out by Mead Products. Mead Products with no affiliation with Thor, whose day it was yesterday. But at any rate, just your standard, who knows where we got this. Staples while it was still alive. Office Depot. I don't know where we picked this thing up, but look at that. Okay. ACCO Brands. ACCO. ACCO Brands. This is branded like by 5 different people. Cambridge, I guess, is the name of the model of the calendar. A little spiral bound thing that we stick to the fridge with a magnet. Mead is a brand name that I recognize for office products. I don't know what ACCO has to do with anything, but okay. So this one has about 50 different companies claiming responsibility for this thing. Just on the page on June 2020, I point out for you that it helpfully notes that last Sunday was Flag Day, and I guess I kind of expect that from an office calendar. Oh, even though Does anybody do anything for Flag Day? Some people put some. I saw in the neighborhood people had flags out, although I couldn't make out whether they were. I saw them yesterday, and I don't know whether they were still up from Flag Day because they were lazy. I didn't take them down, or they always have. Or Flag Day is the first day that they put up their flag, and then they never take it down, which might not even really be in comportment with the flag code, whatever. Or whether they were early July 4th decorations, but I guess we have some Flag Day fans in the neighborhood. Summer begins tomorrow. It's noted here on the calendar, even though I always thought that was the 21st. It's notes here, 21st, of course, is Father's Day. I expect those things out of a calendar. I am also helpfully reminded that June 24th, next Wednesday, for those of you listening, I guess nowhere else in Canada but just in Quebec, they celebrate, maybe, I don't know, they might know about, or it's famous, Saint Jean-Baptiste Day. And Jean-Baptiste is a guy who's doing very well and is getting more and more recognition these days. Not surprising that, of course, that he would have a day. The saints have those things. But that's the extent to which these things are put on the calendar. And I have noticed in the last couple of years they've become much better at putting important Muslim holidays on the calendar as well. I see here July 30th, Eid al-Adha begins at sundown. We have Canada Day coming up on July 1st. I shouldn't forget that one. Happy Canada Day coming up. That will be before our own Independence Day on July 4th. Also, this is not a holiday. Well, I mean, it is a holiday, I guess, for some, maybe for pagans. Full moon noted here for July 5th. But no Juneteenth. That's really the point. And I'm not going to say you need to boycott this calendar or anything, but I'll be very interested to see whether next year's calendar takes more note of, well, any note of Juneteenth or any other holiday notations that might be of interest to African Americans to see on their calendar. And they've made some strides. I don't know if I don't mean to disparage or reward the calendar company. I'm not the person who would be responsible for doing that, I don't think. But, Kwanzaa is on there, and that's a good thing and all. And, of course, the federal holidays that we've created in recognition of famous African Americans are on there. But, I guess Juneteenth occupies kind of a weird, non-official space, which I guess people are probably going to be moving to change legislatively. And then that will give all the momentum necessary to the calendar authorities at ACO, Meade, Cambridge, whoever it is responsible for this calendar, to mark Juneteenth next year, I guess. All right, well, no excuse for forgetting since we've been talking about it all week long. So there we are. All right, let's see. Yes, the mighty OCD noting for all of us that you can only leave the flag up at night if it has a spotlight on it. I have learned that from the scouts in the home. And that's one of the most frequently violated items in the flag code. Also, the bad weather situation, I guess chiefly responsible for that. Car dealerships, McDonald's installations, and the like, who have no idea about those things. Plus, of course, there's always the American flag thongs that you frequently see. Are you not all frequently seeing those? All right. Well, it might just be me. I don't know. Other stories to sort our way through. There are many. But first, I will read Bill's morning tweet. He'll be the second of our listenership's morning tweets because Mighty OCD stacked his up on top of Bill's here. Daily Coast Radio is live now. It's been true for 10 minutes. Going on full 10 minutes now. In addition to the best news and commentary, most of which I've just given to you. Today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, offers preemptive thoughts. Good. I'll stop all the thoughts if we can. Thoughts and prayers to the fine folks already lined up for Trump's hermetically sealed COVID rights rally in Tulsa. Do have fun. I agree. Yes, you all have musical entertainment available to you, as I mentioned yesterday. I finally did turn on the sound and listen to that song. It's terrible, as expected. But they all look like they're having a good time, and why not? They're about to die. Good luck to all of them. I think masks are being handed out at the event, but are not required, so that ought to be fun. And, we'll wait and see what happens. It'll be a couple of weeks before we find out what's going on. Tulsa already having its own problems that they can blame these things on instead. And I am sure they will duck responsibility insofar as that is possible. Big story of the day from yesterday. Most people, I guess, spent in my Twitter circles, which would mean basically your Twitter circles, so you know about this already, spent the day either talking about the various goofs, gaffes, and idiocies contained in the Wall Street Journal interview. A lot of it hinging on not Michael Bolton, but John Bolton. I did it again. I love that. I love doing that. So I'll never stop. Including one anecdote in which Trump, I guess, attempts to blame part of the failed coronavirus response on John Bolton in a roundabout way. It was a terrible job of doing it, but of course Bolton wasn't there. And I've spoiled the joke already, but he was, I guess, recounting for everybody how bold and forward-looking he was when in late January, in response to people lighting their hair on fire in meetings with him about the possible spread of coronavirus from out of China, which had already happened, of course, but they pretended it was a new thing and an outbreak that could be contained at that point. Anyway, he said I was going to cut off travel from China, and he said nobody wanted me to do it. Everybody advised me against it, but I did it anyway because I'm so bold, which actually doesn't look all that good. Everybody told me no, or it's too late, or it's useless, or the way you're doing it is wrong. And then, of course, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because it looks tough, but then I'm going to do it in such haphazard fashion that it doesn't do anything. That was the upshot of the travel ban. And I guess he hints in the story, or says in the story, that even John Bolton was against my doing it, but I did it anyway. And that just goes to show you how dumb John Bolton is, because everyone knows that my travel ban my ban on travel from China was a big reason why something, because we have 2.2 million infections in this country by far. I mean, by like a factor of 5 more than anybody else in the world. And it's impossible to point to anything that Trump has done that's been a success in this, because what more evidence do you need but that we are the world's epicenter of coronavirus? The nearest competitor, if that's the right term for it, is Brazil, who still, I guess maybe today, tomorrow, over the weekend, depending on the reliability of their reporting over the weekend, will top 1 million cases this weekend, but, we'll be creeping our way up towards 2.5 million. It's not even close. Anyway, he views this whole thing as a great success, and the idea that John Bolton opposed him is evidence of his incompetence in matters of worldwide importance, except for the fact, of course, that the travel ban was imposed at the end of January, and Bolton had left the administration in September, and there was no way he could have been there. And it's kind of, I guess, part of the amazingness of the story is that the Wall Street Journal reporters sit there and take the interview, and nobody says that, you're saying you argued with John Bolton about this in January, but he had left the administration in September. You're mentally ill, sir. You don't remember anything correctly, and, maybe you want to retract that. But they don't. They're just gathering the facts. I'm just writing down what he says, and I'm not here to be a psychiatrist. And I suppose and who would remember necessarily off the top of their head? Just because they're working for the Wall Street Journal doesn't necessarily mean they remember the date that John Bolton departed. But it's not hard to figure out that he seems to have left a long time ago, a long time before the travel ban. And also, I know that when he's bragging about the travel ban from China, I would think at this point Wall Street Journal reporters would have top of mind, yeah, that was a huge failure, and it was the most porous travel ban and the most poorly executed travel ban I ever heard of, and that's all he ever did. And I know that when the time comes to write up my analysis of this interview, I'm going to have to be debunking this episode. So maybe you would hope that that would jar their memory about the John Bolton thing, and they would realize right away that it was false. Maybe they did, but their editors say, we just want the pure, unadulterated transcript of him spilling his guts, and then we can pull it apart later. I don't know. It's a bizarre situation. I guess the other other bizarre situation. You're probably waiting for some discussion of this one. And here it is, the big news that everyone's been talking about. I'm just kidding. This is a different news that no one's been talking about yet. John Huntsman's wife has tested positive for COVID-19. I am positive that Mr. Huntsman's wife has a name, but I am reading you the headline as contained in the tweet from The Hill, and, they're not super progressive over there, and they're not really going to do that. And it's a headline, and if you put the woman's name in there, what is her name? I don't know what it is. Mary Kay Huntsman. So if they said Mary Kay Huntsman has COVID-19, I'd say, is that someone related to John Huntsman, maybe? I don't know who Mary Kay Huntsman is. And the answer is yes. That's his wife. And she's a lovely person, I'm sure. And I'm sorry that she has COVID-19. And John Huntsman is one of those, he's one of those Utah Mormon conservative people that now occupy a weird place in our minds because Mitt Romney is sometimes capable of reflecting, humanity. And it has to be reflected humanity. But we're happy that he does it from time to time. And Huntsman, too, has a little streak of this in him. And even if he didn't, COVID-19 kind of sucks. Well, anyway, Mary Kay Huntsman, the wife of former Utah Governor John Huntsman, has tested positive for the coronavirus. She confirmed Thursday, just over a week after the former presidential candidate, you remember he was once one of those, announced his own COVID-19 diagnosis. The news here is that John Huntsman has it as well. He was ambassador to China, right, for some time during the Obama administration. Isn't that the case? Now, that was not when he got COVID-19. That would be too long of an incubation period. But back together again is a quote here that's from the Huntsmans. Back together again after COVID-19 isolated us apart. For no apparent reason, I guess, because the good news is that John is on the mend. The bad news is that this is a very, very contagious virus. I have now tested positive. So worried now about the rest of our household, she wrote on Instagram. And, well, she should be. It is a highly contagious virus, and it's likely that anybody who was in the house with you while you were ill has got it too. But, healthcare being what it is, maybe it'll be okay. Although I will point out something that Mark Sumner mentioned on Twitter the other day. This is going to be super stream of consciousness today. And that's the best way to do any show, I think. I watched his tweet go by yesterday and retweeted it for all of you. He just happened to mention, for all of those people who expected that the case fatality rate would plummet with additional testing, right? We have been pointing out I had been pointing out for weeks, and I've kind of stopped, that while in the initial stages of the pandemic in the United States, there was a lot of discussion and debate back and forth about how much mortality, how frequently should we be expecting people who contract COVID-19 to die from COVID-19, and there was some discussion about that, some debate about that, because it was the rate that we were being handed, that people in the United States were at that point currently dying from COVID-19 was said to be artificially elevated because it was striking vulnerable populations, and that there was a vast population of infected out there who either were exhibiting only mild symptoms or who were perhaps even asymptomatic and who were recovering very quickly on their own and didn't really enter into the system, and they never got positive diagnoses. And so therefore there were lots of infected folks who had recovered and had no ill effects of the virus very quickly after their infection, and those people weren't going into the denominator, and so we weren't finding out really what the real death rate was. And that was back in the day when you couldn't get your hands on a COVID test, even though the president was promising that everybody who wanted one could get one. We are now, the statistics from Worldometer tell us, at the point where we have performed in this country, according to these statistics, 26,725,931 tests. Not necessarily all on different people. 27, or I guess it can't be 27. 26 million even were performed on Donald Trump and the people around him, and the other 725,931 have been distributed at random around the country. But we've performed 26.7 million tests. Again, that too, by far the most in the world, and Trump's very proud of that number for whatever reason. It's still inadequate to the task of finding out exactly what the death rate is. But as the testing rate has gone through the roof, the fatality rate, the mortality rate, hasn't really diminished by all that much. We did inch it up to almost about 5.8%, as I recall, before I started to see it fall. But it has only receded back to about 5.3%, Mark says. And the way he puts it here, for all those people who expected that the case fatality rate would plummet with additional testing, with more than 2.2 million cases in the U.S., the fatality rate remains a shocking 5.3%. 1 person in 20 is dying from this virus. He goes on to say, this disease is a bastard. Don't catch it. True. Don't. True is a bastard. And that's something we've lost sight of. And, other countries have had it worse, certainly. But to be honest, it's worrisome that even with all those tests and all the tests we've performed, or that have been performed worldwide, I don't think I have a total number for that, but there's 8.6 million cases out there, and the death rate is not that, it doesn't look like it. Let's do the numbers on this. I don't think I have the rate worldwide, unless that was maybe 5.3% was the worldwide number. Mark didn't indicate. It's 457,029 reported deaths, according to, again, Worldometers here, over 8,614,984 cases. Yeah, that does give us the 5.3% worldwide. How are we doing here in the United States? I guess I ought to make sure that that's the case here in the U.S., but it wouldn't surprise me if it was exactly the same. One, given that we have, we bear responsibility for a quarter of the caseload of the world. I stopped tracking that as well, but let's see. We are sitting on 120,691 deaths at this very moment, over 2,264,307 cases, giving us also a 5.3% death rate. And the whole segment is saved. That's good news. How are we doing in terms of the number of cases, by the way? Is the 2,264,307 we currently bear responsibility for, over the 8,614,984 is over a quarter. It's 26.3% if we round up just a little bit on the decimal point. So, we're doing good. It's a great success story. I did mention the other day, right, that we're now at the point, we've passed 120,000 deaths. We were just shy of 60,000 deaths when, in late April, Jared Kushner declared the whole thing over. You remember there was this sort of sense that that they had predicted there would be something like 60,000 deaths, though they had pegged that number to August. It is still only mid-June, and we've doubled it. But at 60,000, he pretty much declared the pandemic over and said that the Trump administration's response had been a great success story. We now have, as I mentioned, I think the other day, there are more people have died since he declared it a great success story than had died to that point. We've doubled the rate, or doubled the death toll, as it were, and we're still going. And no real indication that it's going to, it's certainly not going away with warmer weather. That was another of the morning tweets that I saw and felt it might be worth commenting upon. People were talking about, well, whatever happened to that whole it's going to go away. Well, Trump said in April with the warmer weather, like a miracle, it'll disappear. And we all realize, no, he's stupid. Don't listen to him. That's not really going to happen. I happened to see, I think Greg retweeted this one this morning too, from Nathan Calmo. Who is Nathan Calmo? A LSU poli-sci and communications professor. And he says, still looking like warmer weather isn't much help. He's displaying a map with the hot spots of the outbreaks. And of course, it looks like the southeast, the hot and muggy southeast, the old Confederacy, if you want to look at it that way, is among the what's the current hottest spots in the country for this stuff. I don't know what the scale is here, and maybe if I click through I'll find out, but it says still looking like warmer weather isn't much help. It seemed unlikely from the start based on Louisiana's experience. That was true, but attracted a lot of believers nonetheless. It's not that it can't have some marginal effect, just that its effect isn't substantial enough to stop mass spread. And it's not. And that's the bottom line of it. And there's lots of nuance around it that could explain why it is that hot weather could, in fact, like super hot weather really could, in fact, kill the virus. Heat does kill it if it's intense enough. But why places with hot weather aren't seeing the virus just dying off, including the explanation that, well, when the weather gets really hot, people go inside for the air conditioning, and it's indoor air is the current thinking that seems to be the most dangerous for spreading the virus. And that probably has something to do with it. But I think we knew right away that warmer weather wasn't going to do much to kill off the virus, especially as we found out early on that, say, Tom Hanks had it, and he had caught it in Australia where it was the end of the summer, a summer which most of Australia was actually literally on fire. You don't get much hotter weather than that, and he had managed to catch it there anyway. Just as the weather was cooling off, true, but it didn't tell us too much, and neither does our situation here. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see. Okay, what's new here? Brian Monroe asking a question. Let's see. Do Okies have to pass the Bach Center? I kept forgetting. What was the name of the arena they're using? Bach Center. BOK. I have no idea. What is that? That's the arena that they're using, but it's probably famous for something. I'll check into it. Unless one of you know, let me know. Do Okies have to pass the Bach Center, like Reebok, Springbok? What kind of Bach is this? On the way to the Tulsa Hospital. It might be nice to reminisce about the good times had while heading to the ICU. Well, of course, rhetorical question, actually, I'm sure, but it would depend on where they're coming from, I guess. But rhetorical answer for you. Maybe. I have noticed, though, what has been interesting while the COVID virus spreads all throughout the southeast and the hot spots are flaring up, I have been looking back at the people who back in late March through early April were participating in the James O'Keefe-inspired stupidity hashtag Film Your Hospital, which sometimes was rendered as Film Your Hospitals or Film My Hospital or Film Any Friggin' Hospital. It was those sorts of different hashtags. It was never really an effective campaign anyway, but back in March 31st or so, people who were driving by these hospitals that are now at maximum capacity saying, there's no one here. This is all a hoax. It proves that the virus doesn't mean anything. Now, of course, at that time, I suppose in their defense, they could look back and say, look at all the people who told us wait 2 weeks. And then they waited 2 weeks, and then they waited another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks. And it has been like 12 weeks since they did that. So the virus was a lot slower to move, but that had a lot to do with the lockdown. That was the reason for the travel ban in the lockdown, and why we're not supposed to be traveling significant distances for any reason, even if we're staying in our car and breathing our own air and bringing scuba equipment with us wherever we go. The idea was you were supposed to cut down on the mobility, and that would cut down on the speed with which the virus moved around, and that's why they were tracking cell phone data, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, 12 weeks later, those hospitals are full, their ICU units are full, although there are still a couple of people out there saying it still looks like the parking lot is mostly empty, because that's, if you go into the hospital for 3 weeks, you don't just park your car there, whatever, plus all the sick people are inside. But it was a little bit ironic, and in some cases, I was finding headlines about specific individual hospitals that had reached capacity and were diverting patients elsewhere that had been surveilled in late March and early April and declared COVID-free by the amateur sleuths who were looking. So, that one didn't turn out to be, it didn't turn around as quickly as some people predicted it would. But I thought it was pretty interesting, and of course those people are nowhere to be found. And if you did find them and corner them, they would give you some excuse as to why they're still right about things. But again, I don't know. Wait another 12 weeks, I guess, and we'll see what happens between now and then. So I had left off with this guy's tweet about how it looked like warmer weather isn't much help. And I did note also this morning some of the data I've been calculating myself. And I really have to work up a spreadsheet so that it's a lot easier to do. I don't have to do it by hand every single time. But I've been interpreting the Worldometer's data on daily reports, daily new cases of COVID-19 being reported around the country and around the world, and then trying to convert that to their version of the per capita measurement, the per 1 million population. It's a much easier calculation, just shorthand-wise. You don't have to type in the entire number of the population in order to get it. But anyway, as it turns out, I've been surveying and putting together lists of the top 10 countries in the world by that day's report, or the previous day's report of new cases, and then converting it to per 1 million in population. And consistently, it doesn't, the list changes daily. So it's not necessarily a great tracking device day to day, and I suppose nothing really is, and that's why they use the 7-day rolling averages, etc. But it indicates trends to me. And of course, I've also gotten some criticism about, it skews towards microstates because they have such small populations anyway, and if you get any significant amount of virus there, you're going to move a microstate toward the top, or very small countries. And that is true. I do notice that bias. But I'm hoping that, for one thing, at some level, reducing it down to the per 1 million in population takes away, or obviates that kind of bias. Pardon me. And helps us get it can't be viewed as the only statistic, but viewed alongside statistics like where are the most cases happening. It'll help give you a more complete picture, or maybe make you think about alternatives of like where are the hotspots, and what if there was something we could do about hotspots to try and calm them down that people might actually do, like stay at home, wear masks, etc. I don't know if any people are really doing that. They're rejecting the advice, but if you had that advice to give them and thought that it might work, you could target your advice and say, you who have the largest number of cases, though you have a large population and so therefore per capita might not have as much as this other place, you guys ought to wear some masks. And you over there who have the highest per capita, you also should be wearing some masks. You who are not suffering such high per capita rates, you also should be wearing masks. But congratulations on not having that much per capita. But I'm keeping an eye on you, India, where their per capita infection rate to date, in reported cases, if you can trust their reporting, or anybody's reporting. I'm not saying India is singled out, although they do have kind of a fascist government, and maybe they would be doing this. I mean, people did notice that pattern too, rising to the top of the list. United States, Russia, India, UK, all with governments somewhat questionable in terms of their commitment to the truth of these things. But I thought it might reveal some interesting patterns about where things were and what we might do about it. Anyway, as it turns out, here's what it revealed in terms of hot weather. 5 of the top 10 countries in the world in terms of day-to-day reports of new cases on a per million in population basis. 5 of the top 10 are Arabian Peninsula nations. Qatar, which I've mentioned before, is at the top of every list. Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. And they have some significant COVID problems that almost put them in the top 10 in some of the other countries. The UAE, Yemen's infection rate per capita or per 1 million is lower than the rest. I am guessing that it has a lot to do with one, the size of the population. The population of Yemen, by comparison to the other smaller Arabian Peninsula states, is very large. And there's a war and not a lot of travel going on to and from Yemen. So I think maybe the virus was a little slower to catch on there. And war tends, I think, to force people into social distancing and isolation involuntarily, as it is here, but under slightly different circumstances. So I suppose the good news is less coronavirus. Bad news, genocide and war. So in terms of outcome, dead is dead. But good news on coronavirus. I'm trying to throw you something here, Yemen, but you don't need my help. Anyway, I just thought I would point that out. The Arabian Peninsula, pretty famous for hot weather. Again, though, a lot of pushback from people who said, well, when it gets hot there, which is always, the people retreat to indoor air-conditioned spaces now that they can afford it thanks to oil money. But it does turn out that I don't have a complete picture of what's going on in these countries. But what I can glean from reports is that the vast majority of the infection is among, I think we expected this, among the migrant worker and imported worker class. And I don't know how much time those guys get to spend in the air conditioning. They might air condition their quarters, for lack of a better term. They lived in pretty cramped quarters. They might not. But it could be pretty hot, and maybe the virus doesn't thrive in that heat, but it can still thrive so long as you're living in cramped quarters and the virus is happy. It can find air conditioning to a virus is, well, there's 2 possibilities. One, getting inside an air-conditioned building. It's cool in here, just like humans. We have so much in common, the coronavirus and humans. And the other way of doing it, of course, is if you get inside a body, where even if it's 120 degrees in the body, it's 98. You might spike a little bit if it's really hot. 98, 99, even 100 degrees in the body. That's fine for you. So, I don't know. I don't know what was driving people to think that like warm weather was going to do in the virus. The virus seems to do great when it's about 98.6 degrees. It's loving life. It's doing fantastic. And if you have warm weather, people would say, well, that's like, 89, 90, 95 degrees. That's even hot. But that's like it is in the body. Now, of course, if you're baking on a stainless steel surface, well, then the temperature goes up. And that's what kills the virus. Anyway, I don't know. The point is that this theory isn't really holding together very well. And while you can try and parse the thing, what we do know is this. Trump is an idiot, and saying that warmer weather in April was going to make it magically disappear. It has not magically disappeared. It hasn't even disappeared according to science. Nothing is making it disappear. So there's no point in trying to save the comment at this point. Okay. I thought that was fairly, somewhat interesting anyway, worth sharing. Too late now if it wasn't. We can move on, though. There was another story that all of you probably noticed, that Matt Gaetz has... Congratulations, Matt Gaetz, to the... I don't know what. On the discovery by the world that you have a son, or someone who identifies as a son to you. That's very interesting, too. Congratulations to woke Matt Gaetz, who now understands what it means to identify personally as something other than perhaps your legal or genetic determination. And don't expect any sympathy from him, of course. You're not going to get any. We already have that on record. We know how he is about paying back in terms of sympathy. But the big news of the yesterday on Twitter, besides this frog, pardon me, that is insisting on taking up residence in my throat and has nothing to do with COVID-19, was that what a bizarre story this was. You do know it, right? I'll just sort of recap it if somehow you missed this. But I guess in debate in the Judiciary Committee the other day, I don't know, I can probably find you the video for the video wasn't very exciting, but it was being distributed because Matt Gaetz gets upset in it and he yells at somebody, and Democrats were laughing at at how poorly he had performed in this debate. Who was he arguing with? Cedric Richmond, Democrat from Louisiana, it was the Judiciary Committee. What would they have been doing this week? They would have been talking about Black Lives Matter, police brutality, police murders and corruption, and all the other fun things exhibited by police of late, and for many years prior. And Cedric Richmond, who's a black man, was, of course, recounting the various points that you might expect in this particular debate, and talking about the difficulties of raising kids in the black community and the talk that you have to have with your black kids, and particularly your sons, about how to act around cops, and probably at this stage white people in general, because you never know when somebody's going to call the cops on you. If it turns out they are one of those people in particular that we refer to with a name that's been hijacked for this purpose, for which I apologize to all the people who actually have to live with that name, although I bet that's going to damage the popularity of that name from here on out. But, that sometimes happens with names. Adolf kind of went the way of, also so did Gay. So Gay Hitler, Adolf Hitler, all the Hitlers really, but that's probably owing to the last name more than anything else. But anyway, you get the idea. So Cedric Richmond was talking about how difficult it is to have to deal with these problems and the difficulties in particular of raising black children. And I guess he made some assumptions, probably, that most of the white Republicans on the other side of the aisle arguing with them, that there was no such problem. And if everybody just obeyed police, nobody would be hurt or harmed in any way. Can't you just do that? You guys don't know what it's like to raise black kids, or at least non-white kids. And Matt Gaetz flew into a rage. He was outraged that Cedric Richmond had made this assumption that none of them were raising non-white kids. And that struck everything as weird because, well, for one thing, Matt Gaetz is a white kid. I mean, how old is he? He's like 30-something, right? Let's look that one up and get the Wikipedia numbers on him. We got to spell his name right. And let's see. Wikipedia will tell us that he is 4. Wow, that can't be right. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't actually say that. He was born, though, in 1982. I can't even do that math. That's too young for me. 82, 92, 2002, 2012. All right, so he's 38, right? Or thereabouts. Yeah, May 8th. Okay, May 7th. Sorry, just wanted to get that one right. Don't want to shortchange you there, Matt. And, of course, one of our favorite folks, Matt Gaetz. Very young, kind of been handed a political career, as I recall, by his dad, was in like the state senate and yada yada. Did we do this yesterday? I can't remember now whether I was telling this story to you or to the rest of my family. Anyway, 38 and unmarried, and no one had any knowledge of his having any kids, right? At this point, and that was not surprising, given, well, a lot of things. One, he wasn't married. Two, he's a little rocky in terms of his personal stability. A couple of DUIs, not really a great background, whatever. But anyway, he surprised everybody by insisting that this was not true, and he was outraged by Cedric Richmond's presumption that none of them had raised non-white kids. He had, in fact, raised non-white kids, and everyone was a little confused about what the hell does that mean. And it just seemed more like Matt Gaetz, he kind of does this thing, that he was just going to get caught up in the moment and start insisting that he had non-white kids in his family that he had raised, even though he didn't have an immediate family of his own. But he shocked the world, except not the entire world, but he shocked a good portion of the world yesterday, revealing that he did in fact have what he said was an adopted, I have to phrase it that way, an adopted son, Nestor, who he, was essentially the light of his life, and that raising him had changed his life, and all the things that people would normally say about raising kids. Except this was a big surprise. And then he provided a photo, which was also a little, I don't know why. It caught a lot of people by surprise because, Matt Gaetz is 38. That's not young, but it's not old. And he's a youngish looking 38, a boyish looking, one might say, because he's white. And despite the fact that he has an arrest record, I think a black man with an arrest record of comparable to his and his age would probably be viewed quite differently. Not as a roguish young ruffian necessarily, but, as a thug probably, is I think what we've learned from our experience with all of this. Anyway, Nestor didn't look a great deal younger than Dad here, so to speak. And although it's a good question, does he call him Dad? It's not necessarily a necessity in order to establish it as a valid adoptive relationship, although papers would also help us figure out whether or not there was a real adoptive relationship here. But again, we make allowances for identity, so let's allow it. Anyway, as it turns out, Nestor is 19, so he just is a older looking 19, whereas Matt is a younger looking 38. And it raised questions too, as he insisted that that they had an adoptive relationship, and maybe that's not it either. And then he goes on and he gives an interview, I think the People magazine, straightens the whole thing out, in which he just basically says, we don't go in for that whole paperwork thing. The law and order Republicans don't buy into the whole legal structure, you see. But apparently there was kind of a complex relationship that, it still raises eyebrows as unusual, to say the least. From what I can glean in all of this, Matt Gaetz was dating Nestor's older sister at some point. And I guess, and I think some others have, on Twitter, the Horse Whisperer was also sort of speculating that maybe this is the way it was. People sort of hints at this as well, like perhaps apparently Nestor and his sister's parents did their father die and their mother was in poor health, and they immigrated from Cuba some 7 years ago or so. And I guess Matt Gaetz found himself dating the sister, and she, was struggling with her own problems and surrogate parenting, I guess, for Nestor, who was 12 at the time. And I guess you could see Matt, in caring for the sister, saying, hey, I'll help you out with your brother as well. Or maybe if they lived together, he might well have moved in with them. That starts to explain it. Now, they broke up at some point, but I guess the story is that it's, Matt had, looking at this very favorably, perhaps had used his privilege, which is another thing maybe you could learn from, to help out with Nestor. And when they broke up, he felt that he still had some obligation to help Nestor. It's not Nestor's fault that they broke up, and they continued to care for him. And I don't know what happened to the sister, or maybe she's nearby. Maybe it was with her assent. Maybe People magazine will even tell us. But it was a little unusual. I will say that. And then, of course, we had the usual backlash among our progressive. We love our progressive standpoints. And we were being reminded, well, we do, like I said, allow for people to identify in different ways, not necessarily according to the legal paperwork. True. We also, should be making room for it. Like, okay, maybe maybe you should just take it for what it's worth that a rich white person has taken it upon himself to help out a young disadvantaged person. And then, of course, there were other speculations out there like, well, before they found out about the sister, people said, that's interesting. This is a young boy, essentially, that Matt Gaetz, out of nowhere, has moved into his house and live with him. And then we were, of course, reminded, well, don't get all homophobic about it if that has something to do with it. But apparently it doesn't. Or at least that's not what the story that we're getting from People magazine here. Are you interested in finding out more about it? I will tell you what. I will refer you to the People magazine write-up and not read the whole thing. But it tells a relatively plausible story, I suppose. Although I'd like to know what happened when he broke up with the sister, what sort of arrangement they came to with respect to guardianship of Nestor. But what are you going to do? They're going to tell us what that story is, and we're going to be sitting there saying, well, we can either choose to believe it or not, but I don't know that it makes a great deal of difference. But, I guess what I would say the best outcome from all of this is, could we expect Matt Gaetz to come to the realization that perhaps he had been too dismissive of other people who identify in ways other than what their legal paperwork says they're supposed to? And maybe he could have a bit more compassion for them. The answer is likely no. Let me add this twist to the story. I did see the twisty tweet of Katie Hill, previously member of the House who had to, or didn't have to, but chose to anyway, resign from her representation of California's 25th district. You remember her. She too had an interesting family situation. And she had this to say on Twitter. Many of you know Matt Gaetz and I have an unlikely friendship. That is unlikely. I can't stand a lot of his beliefs, but he's been there for me when others haven't. That is really interesting. So maybe that indicates, in what way was he there for you when others haven't been? And maybe Matt Gaetz, in private anyway, exhibits some of that sympathy for the non-traditional in other people's families as well. I guess Katie Hill knows something about that. And she did say he talks about Nestor more than anything and has done so much for his son and is truly a proud dad. And that basically you should stop giving them crap about the situation, with reference to, I didn't even see this thing, a hashtag free Nestor, which I understand. I get the joke, but I'm not certain it was offered as a joke, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But so she's saying back off of this thing, and that she remembers him talking about Nestor, where everybody else said he has never mentioned this guy at all. Somebody who's your son really might have borne some mention at some point to someone. And of course, the internet sleuths dug out a couple of very interesting still photos and videos in which Nestor does appear and is mentioned, including a photo from when Matt Gaetz was in the Florida House, the state legislature, the House there, and he's photographed with, as the caption, or his caption on his own Facebook page, refers to him and a young girl there who are House pages as local students. I'm having a great time working with local students. This woman, a young woman, girl, 15 years old maybe at the time, and Nestor, and his last name is Galban. And it's weird in terms of, like, if you're trying to think of, he's been claiming he's his son this whole time, to say, oh yeah, I love to refer to my son as a local student. But again, other people pointing out, he's, maybe he's trying to shield him in some way from, the notoriety that comes with being associated with Matt Gaetz. Maybe. It's a plausible explanation. I just thought that was really interesting. And Katie Hill, though, says, yeah, he did talk about him all the time. So maybe you give him some leeway, although other people did push back on Katie's comment and pointed out that, where was he when you were really in trouble and it came time for you to consider resignation at everyone else's demand? Did he step up and defend? But maybe he did, and maybe he was a voice in the wilderness. And, who's going to be able to say, well, I was going to resign from Congress, but Matt Gaetz has risen to my defense, and so therefore everyone knows I no longer have to. I don't know how much good his defense would be. But, if it's the case that he wasn't particularly effective as a defender for Katie Hill, well, then we have our answer. And you might not find the kindness reciprocated if you come to Matt Gaetz's defense now. That might not be the only reason to do it, of course. You might be a better person than most of us are. Maybe this weekend will give you a chance to demonstrate that for others. That's the end of that story. It really was a bizarre day, though, wasn't it? We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on forward. That's, I guess, all you're going to learn today about Nestor, unless you read the People magazine profile of Matt and his explanation for it. It just came out yesterday, so it's fresh news or fresh lies, depending on how it strikes you, I guess. But it's worth taking a look at. I found it somewhat interesting that they even pursued it. And I was interested in the whole thing. Nestor, to my knowledge, before that was just the name of Captain Haddock's butler from the Tintin comics series, and I was surprised that no one was talking about that. That was the true shocker in the whole story for me. All right, what else is in pocket? Let's see. Oh yes, right. We also noticed yesterday. There was the justifiable uproar about the Trump Facebook advertisements featuring the coded Nazi symbolism. And I was dismissive of the story, not because I didn't believe that it was, in fact, coded Nazi symbolism, but that, just generally speaking, these guys are Nazi sympathizers, or I suppose another way of looking at it is they think it's very cute to hint darkly or, maybe quite openly at Nazi ideology, Nazi imagery. In particular, I think Stephen Miller thinks it's very funny because Stephen Miller is Jewish and he feels like he can fall back on, now, of course I'm not a Nazi or invoking Nazi imagery. I'm Jewish. There's no way I could do it. Well, sure, there is a way you could do it. You could just do it, and then you would be, and everyone would see it, and then everyone would say, and then you might say, well, but it's coincidental or whatever. What was happening, I think, here is that there's a mix between Jewish Nazis and other non-Jewish Nazis who think Godwin's law will still protect them, I guess, and may or may not actually agree with or believe in some of the things that they're hinting at with these little breadcrumbs that they leave us. But I think chiefly influential weirdos in Trump's circle, like Stephen Miller, think that, oh no, it's not really the case that I believe. I do believe this about immigrants, but that doesn't make me a Nazi. Killing Jews makes me a Nazi. Killing Central Americans makes me American, or something. But I think the chief interest in all of these stupid breadcrumbs is trolling more than anything else. I think Stephen Miller, anyway, enjoys the aspect of shocking everybody by making these references or allowing these references to be made on behalf of Trump, the candidate, to own the libs. He knows that the liberals will spend the whole day trying to parse whether or not this inverted red triangle is the inverted, the supposedly infamous inverted red triangle that was put to use in Nazi concentration camps and in their detention system. It is, but he's hoping that. Well, I love doing that because it hints that we're serious about eliminating immigrants to our base, and some of them are actually excited about the Nazi imagery, and it's like a bad boy move to do this, and they like it, and I enjoy it because that too, it's a bad boy kind of a thing to do. And liberals will spend their whole day obsessing over it and researching on the internet, looking for pictures of people wearing inverted red triangles to prove their point. And of course, they will prove their point. They're correct. We did borrow it from the Nazis, but we're not really Nazis. And they will have wasted their whole day doing that, and everyone will think of them as the libs who cried wolf and get tired of it. And in a way, I guess that worked. It got me tired about it, but it really is true that they're doing that and that they are aware of the Nazi connection to it. They just think that they can get away by saying, I was just kidding. Or, I think they love dropping those hints when they could say it's something else. It's surveyor's symbols, or, like with the crosshairs, or, I didn't know it's a sheriff's star. That was the other explanation, right? We used a 6-pointed star because it's a sheriff's star. That sort of thing. I think they love it when they can try and duck. And the more implausible their excuse for ducking responsibility for using Nazi references and imagery, the more interesting it is to them. So, with that in mind, I happened to spot the tweet from Simon Rosenberg, who started off his tweet thread saying, can't stress enough how important it is that we draw attention to Trump's escalating embrace of clearly fascist language, symbols, and tactics. This would stand in contrast to my insistence yesterday that it is not important for me personally to point to this because there were some other things I wanted to get to. But it is important to take note of it. That is true. And Simon includes his own tweet from yesterday, that reads, the invention and promotion of far left, quote unquote, far left violence by the White House and Barr, and now the Trump campaign, when what we see are right-wingers and police being charged and disciplined, has been, for me, amongst the most dangerous moments of the Trump era. It feels the most authentically fascist. And let's see, he includes a link to Carolyn Orr's compilation of the work that she had done in collecting imagery of the Facebook ads, the various imagery that they used, and documenting for everybody that this imagery had been used in the Facebook ads. Caroline Orr tweets as RVA Wonk. We've called her name a couple of times. So Simon, relying on that tweet for making his point, but he goes on to say, after saying he can't stress how important it is that we draw attention, again, relying on her detective work here, he goes on to say, a red inverted triangle was first used in the 1930s by the Nazis to identify communists and was applied as well to Social Democrats, liberals, members, Freemasons, and other members of opposition parties. So, historical background, all true. More lurid details from Trump World's Nazi homage. And here, is where you start to get the picture of how much they enjoy the gamesmanship of it. He includes the tweet of Julia Ioffe here, whose name we also call from time to time. What a detail, she says. Someone bought 88 ads with that Nazi symbol. And of course, you'll remember this in the stupid numerology of Hitler-loving trolls. The number is a neo-Nazi symbol for HH, H being the 8th letter of the alphabet, HH, or Heil Hitler. Okay. And so 88 is, it gets used in those circles as a not very winky nod to Hitler. What a coincidence, right? And she hat tips Miriam Elder for this at the, and a point, I don't know, is Miriam Elder from the ADL? It's, there's an ADL link, Anti-Defamation League link there, and then a link to the Washington Post and a page clip that says there, 88 ads with the inverted red triangle ran in total across pages for Trump, Pence, and the official Trump team page on the social network. They targeted all 50 states. So another one of those winking things. And, it just happened. Originally it was going to be 100, but I got hungry and I needed a snack. And I just happened to stop at 88. And there are 14 words in the ad. But they love doing this. And I can't tell whether, necessarily whether the people who are behind it are genuine Nazis or just think Nazi references are funny ways of trolling, but who are also awful people and would have a lot in common with Nazis. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. They're awful enough for me to want to see them, ground to dust, and that's fine. And if it turns out that they're genuine Nazis, you can write that on the tombstone too. Anyway, Simon continues here. In the first book about Trump's 4 years in the White House, the chapter about his last 6 months is going to be called Desperately Seeking a Reichstag Fire. And, probably true. And they're happy to have libs think that that's the case so that they spend their time painstakingly documenting the 88 ads that they placed among the 10 million that they did do. And then everyone will laugh as they watch liberals say that and watch most people mostly ignore it. I don't know how responsible I will be for people ignoring it by blowing through it yesterday. But again, I just don't need any more confirmation that that's what they're doing. I blame them for it. They're Nazi sympathizers and outrageous assholes, and I wish they were all dead. Okay. And, look, more evidence that I was right that they should all be dead. Great. Put it in the back. I'll haul it with me for whatever. Okay, let's see. Other news, by the way, on social media and Trump. You will likely have heard this story by now as well, but I thought I would take note of it. Let's see. I heard it first, I guess, here from Max Lewis, the night beat reporter at WSBT. That's how he's identified. So I can't tell you too much more about that. Blue checkmark kind of person. Twitter, he says, has now put a manipulated media label on this doctored video posted by the President of the United States. Trump posted this thing, which I'm sure they say, it was just a joke. We were spoofing CNN. But, it's not clear that they're spoofing it to idiots, and idiots are who follows Donald Trump. And so, as it turns out, many people took it to be true that CNN had, in fact, taken this widely shared video, which I have actually seen in the past, of two toddlers, I guess, encountering one another on the street, and they run towards one another and embrace, and then they talk in baby talk to one another for a minute or two, and then take off running down the street, one chasing the other. And it's an adorable video, and it's supposed to be even more adorable in these times of racial tensions, that one of the toddlers appears to be white and the other appears to be black, and they know no prejudice. And it's fantastic. And it was widely shared in meme type video. Anyway, somebody took it and manipulated it and put graphics on the bottom and took the segment of the two running down the street, one after the other. The young black boy running first and the young white toddler following down the street. And they took that segment and not the hugging segment and put a fake CNN logo on it and their little banner for the Chiron, the style that they have in the red bar. Breaking news, terrified toddler runs from racist baby. Now, they misspelled toddler, which sometimes they do on purpose. There's a wink to one another, but people were pointing that out. And the idea here being, this is video of a racist white toddler chasing a black toddler down the street to beat and attack him. And I can't believe, one, that anybody would believe that would happen, and two, CNN is covering it, and this is outrageous. They're trying to show, the worst of America, and they're trying to portray every white person as racist, even babies, even toddlers, when everyone knows that this is, in fact, the two kids having fun, as we know from the larger context of that beautiful video which everyone saw. And the video that Trump posts goes on to say, well, here's what really happened, and showing the whole video. But, it's being digested in Trump world as those sons of bitches. Look, the president says they did this. They couldn't really have done that, could they? That's outrageous. Are you sure that's not just fake news? The president says it. Wow. The president says it. It must be, of course, with this president, the fact that he says it means it's not true. But anyway, he put it up there with no explanation, and Twitter has had to decide whether or not they're going to do something about it. They put it up where, as the president is circulating manipulated media, and it is manipulated media, and I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure the excuse would be, a smarter person would make the excuse, I knew it was manipulated video. The whole idea was that it was a joke. You didn't get it. I didn't put the sarcasm tag on it. Is that why you didn't get it? But I'm not certain that was the case with Trump, and he may really have believed it, and certainly lots of his people believed it, and that's where we are in this country. Meanwhile, I guess Facebook did take down most of those ads finally with the inverted red triangle in them, so it was a bad day all around for Trump in his social media efforts, unless, of course, the goal was only to occupy our time so that we didn't have enough time to digest the various crimes for which Trump, his cronies, and his family ought to be rounded up and arrested at the minimum at the moment he's no longer in office. But I say, why wait? You know my feelings on these things. These crimes are enormous, and they'll never pay enough for them. I think I can already conclude that. And we're supposed to focus instead on, well, he had a bad day on social media. Okay. And I guess that too, also another of the excerpts from John Bolton's book. There was a passage somewhere, apparently, in which we are given a glimpse into the evil machinations that even Donald Trump's fevered brain are capable of putting together. One of which was that he was consciously aware of the fact that he needed to do something foolish and controversial in order to divert attention from the story of the day, which to that point had been Ivanka's use of personal email accounts to conduct some sort of official business, which is, of course, the cornerstone on which they built the case against Hillary Clinton. But this is just the fifth or sixth such instance involving just Ivanka, not to mention all of the rest of the family and political circles having done the same thing. But I guess we were supposed to take away from that, see how hypocritical he is? And we know, John, it's true. We get it. But thank you for bringing it up. I guess one of the other excerpts, why not spend some time on one of the other ones that circulated and got a lot of attention and is treated in very brief fashion, which makes it terrific for the radio here, by Gabriel Sherman, who always treats these things well, in Vanity Fair. This particular excerpt that fascinated him under the headline of Make Sure I Win. John Bolton's unredacted book shows what Trump was really trying to hide. And there are so many things he was really trying to hide. This one that struck Gabriel Sherman involves Trump's own words to Xi Jinping, among others, were so damning and politicized that the government insisted they be removed. This focusing on the hope, hope that the Trump administration would succeed in removing this material from Bolton's book pre-publication. But, oh my gosh, here it is. It's out in the open anyway, thanks to the intrepid reporting of people who were handed that manuscript. Anyway, I don't blame anybody for taking it and reading it, whatever. Okay, John Bolton's account that Donald Trump asked Chinese President Xi Jinping last June to buy more American farm products. Greg referred to this yesterday, though perhaps not this account. But he asked the president of China to buy more American farm products to help Trump's reelection is so explosive that White House officials prevented Bolton from directly quoting Trump in Bolton's new tell-all memoir. I would print Trump's exact words, but the government's pre-publication review process has decided otherwise. Bolton writes in The Room Where It Happened. Okay, so now we understand how this comes to light. For months, Bolton has been in a standoff with the Trump administration over the book's contents. Back in January, the White House sent a cease and desist letter to Bolton's lawyer, demanding that Bolton's book not be released without the removal of certain details from the manuscript. Most recently, William Barr's Justice Department filed a federal lawsuit asking the judge to block the release of the book next week. Vanity Fair has seen unredacted pages from the book, and it's clear why the White House tried to keep Trump's words secret. They are deeply embarrassing. Really? I mean, you think they're worried about that? Well, sure, why not? They're deeply embarrassing and illustrate Trump's naked politicization of America's foreign policy, for which he should be arrested. And probably, I don't know if necessarily in this case, but in some cases, in my opinion, put on trial by an international tribunal and perhaps executed. There. That's what I feel. Anyway, what are these embarrassing words? Well, according to an unredacted passage shown to Vanity Fair by a source, Trump's ask is even more crudely shocking when you read Trump's specific language. So let's do that. Make sure I win, Trump allegedly told Xi during a dinner at the G20 conference in Osaka, Japan last summer. I probably will win anyway, or I will probably win anyway. So don't hurt my farms. Buy a lot of soybeans and wheat and make sure I win. And I don't know whether that calculus really works for him or not, but that's allegedly what he said. The White House did not respond to a request for comment, unsurprising. Bolton renders Trump's interactions with President Xi in vivid detail. In the passages, Trump comes off like a needy supplicant. See, there, I know now that Greg did, in fact, read this rendering of it because I think that was the language he used. For example, at last year's G20 dinner, with only interpreters present, Xi explained to Trump why China was building concentration camps for the country's minority. And again, we have to, a pop-up in my way here. Two of them. Thanks, Vanity Fair. The Uyghur population, once again, I got to check that pronunciation because I've done it about 100 times, and I can't remember from time to time. So let's go check that. Uyghur. Okay. That's a little easier to work with. That's according to, I don't know, the internet. So we'll take that one. The Uyghur population. We could change the spelling, But anyway, let's see, where were we? Vanity Fair. Okay, so she explains to Trump why China was building concentration camps for the country's minority Uyghur population. Trump allegedly told Xi he approved of the brutal human rights violation. According to our interpreter, Trump said to Xi, "Go ahead, you're doing exactly the right thing," Bolton writes. Of course, it's really the wrong thing. Earlier in the same passage, Bolton writes that Trump told Xi on a phone call ahead of their G20 meeting, "I miss you." It's a weird thing to say, honestly. "I miss you," and then said, "This is totally up to you, but the most popular thing I've ever been involved with is making a deal with China. Making a deal with China would be a very popular thing for me." And I'll give you more Beautiful, beautiful chocolate cake, I guess. Another passage shows Trump's racist views on immigration. This is a fun one. Bolton describes how Trump derailed the White House meeting about Iran strategy by bringing up a right-wing conspiracy theory, I guess, that black South Africans were killing white South African farmers and stealing their land. Okay, where's the conspiracy come from? I guess it's a Vox explainer tells us about it, but you've probably heard about that. Anyway, according to Bolton, Trump blurted out that he wanted to grant the white South Africans asylum and citizenship because, white, victimized by blacks, and so therefore, what a great idea that would be. In the middle of telling everybody who was fleeing their home countries, but who are brown people, no, you can't come in because your claims for need for asylum are illegitimate. But he's going to grant them citizenship on top of that because they're white. So, yeah, that was pretty damaging, and I thought I maybe would spend some time pointing that one out. Let's see. Here's some coronavirus news. Why not throw this one in there? I know you all know that wearing masks is a good idea. And I know we've discussed exactly why it's a good idea. And I know that we have had to explain to people who say that it's not a good idea because it doesn't protect you, that really it's about protecting others. But as it turns out, I see Science Daily here, I guess, discussing perhaps the first study that actually reaches a conclusion about the additional safety of wearing even a non-N95 mask that's afforded by mask wearing here. The tweet is, let's see, from, like I said, Science Daily, making reference to a publication of a study from Texas A&M. Is that right? So let me look at the Science Daily thing here. Face masks critical in preventing spread of COVID-19. Now, that doesn't tell you anything much more than we already knew. But study found that wearing a face mask stopped person-to-person spread of the virus. That also seems like everything that we've heard already. It stops me from transmitting it to you. But it does say in the summary here, a study has found that not wearing a face mask dramatically increases a person's chance of being infected by the COVID-19 virus. And I think we all probably knew that was the case. I mean, if you go someplace unprotected and there's virus in the air, in the droplets of others, you stand a pretty good chance of catching it. But to date, I think most of the studies have said, well, the way you can protect yourself from contracting COVID-19 from others is to protect yourself with a N95 mask. But I think it makes good sense to say, well, okay, N95 masks are being reserved for medical professionals. People are being encouraged to wear cloth masks instead. And a lot of people are avoiding doing that by claiming that it's no protection from COVID-19. Should we study how much protection you might actually get? And doesn't it, can we say scientifically that it reduces your chances? If that's all people will be willing to hear about, can we convince them that there's scientific evidence that says that wearing a cloth mask is protective in some way? And so I guess this is a pretty useful look at this thing. Not that people were going to believe science for any real reason. But here we are. A study by a team of researchers led by a Texas A&M University professor has found that not wearing a mask, which is what those people want, dramatically increases a person's chances of being infected by the COVID-19 virus. Renyi Zhang, Texas A&M Distinguished Professor of Atmospheric Sciences at the Harold J. Haynes Chair of the Colleges of Geosciences, and the colleagues from the University of Texas. I have to use up all of the time. I mean, I'm about to get the break buzzer here, but it's become a ritual to spend all of your time reading out somebody's full title at a university. They must really love this stuff. Well, anyway, that guy with the long title, along with some of his other colleagues at University of Texas who maybe don't have such fancy titles, plus the University of California at San Diego and the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, have had their work published in the current issue of, you remember these guys? The Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or PNAS, or our favorite PNAS, as, we come to call it here on the show. So what have they found for us in PNAS? The team examined the chances of COVID-19 infection and how the virus is easily passed from person to person. From trends and mitigation procedures in China, Italy, and New York City, the researchers found that using a face mask reduced the number of infections by more than 78,000 in Italy from April 6th to May 9th, and by over 66,000 cases in New York City from April 17th to May 9th. Some more detail after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. More input from more corners about the hot weather not necessarily killing off the virus. We're back to square one is one of the more frustrating things about Twitter. Guys, I know about air conditioning. Let's just put it that way. No new information being passed here. The point is, hot weather doesn't make it disappear, and that's that. Thank you. Hope we can put a stop to time wasting on that one. All right, back to the mask situation. This interesting, but should be obvious, but we have to put some science behind it. Rendering from Texas A&M. The team examined those chances, right, and the of COVID-19 transmission and the mitigation practices in Italy and China and New York City. Our results show that airborne transmission via respiratory aerosols represents the dominant route for the spread of COVID-19, Zhang said. Again, no surprise there. By analyzing the pandemic trends without face covering, using the statistical method, and by projecting the trend, we calculated that over 66,000 infections were prevented by using a face mask in a little over a month in New York City. We conclude that wearing a face mask in public corresponds to the most effective way to prevent interhuman transmission. Again, not really clarifying whether that's as an effect of people keeping their own germs in or filtering out other people's germs or some combination at different levels of effectiveness of both. But I was given to understand that they were coming around to that second point. This inexpensive practice, in conjunction with social distancing and other procedures, is the most likely opportunity to stop the COVID-19 pandemic. Our work also highlights that sound science is essential in decision-making for the current and future public health pandemics. One of the paper's co-authors, Mario Molina, is a professor at the University of California, San Diego, and a co-recipient of the 1995 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, in case you were doubting their credentials, for his role in understanding the threat to the Earth's ozone layer of human-made halocarbon gases. Our study establishes very clearly that using a face mask is not only useful to prevent infected coughing droplets from reaching uninfected persons, but is also crucial for these uninfected persons to avoid breathing the minute atmospheric particles or aerosols that infected people emit when talking, and that can remain in the atmosphere tens of minutes and can travel tens of feet, Molina said. Zhang said that many people in China have worn face masks for years, mainly because of the bad air quality in the country. So people there are sort of used to this, he said. Mandated face coverings helped China in containing the COVID-19 outbreak. Okay. Zhang said the results should send a clear message to people worldwide. Wearing a face mask is essential in fighting the virus. Our work suggests that the failure in containing the propagation of COVID-19 pandemic worldwide is largely attributed to the unrecognized importance of airborne virus transmission, he said. Social distancing and washing our hands must continue, but that's not sufficient enough protection. You don't need the word enough in there, but whatever. How ironic that the word enough is superfluous. Anyway, wearing a face mask as well as practicing good hand hygiene and social distancing will greatly reduce the chances of anyone contracting the COVID-19 virus. The study was funded by the Robert A. Welch Foundation, so thanks to them, although we'll probably find out that Robert A. Welch was a slave owner at some point, or whatever. But anyway, the study appears to be a good one. That may actually be true. I don't know who Robert A. Welch is or where he got his family wealth that he was able to start a foundation with, but it wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, so more ammunition, I guess, for the weekend. I'm sure you'll probably spend some time, imaginary or otherwise, in an imaginary or real argument with somebody over face mask wearing. But now there really is scientific evidence that, yes, it's not as effective as an N95 mask. But I mean, again, common sense. The P-test will tell you about that one. I really haven't found any simpler way of putting it than that. If you wear a mask, you will keep your own germs in. That's good for other people. You will also filter out some percentage of other people's germs. That's good for you. Is it as good as an N95 mask? No. Should you be using an N95 mask in daily interactions with others when there's such a shortage of them for medical personnel? No. This is as good as you can get. Why don't you want as good as you can get? I don't know. But apparently some people don't. I've seen some people in arguments on Twitter about this. Is really pretty incredible. The fact that people are really ignorant. It bothers us. It surprises us from time to time. But I saw somebody in conversation with our good friend Scott Charles, who does work in a hospital environment. Somebody saying, you guys have it all backwards. Masks are germ collectors. You shouldn't be wearing a germ collector on your face if you're trying to avoid infection. And, a couple of the doctors pointing out, yeah, masks are germ collectors. That's why doctors wear them when they are operating on you. They collect the germs so that we don't put them in you while we're performing surgery. Get it? Oh, well, but, then you get it all over your hands when you put the mask on. Well, not if you do it properly. That's what Greg's been telling you. Donning and doffing is important. It's perhaps less important for the layperson in the casual use of the mask to make a trip to the grocery store if you take the mask off when you get home and you take it off improperly and get virus on your hands and even on your face by taking it off improperly, but then you get home and wash your hands and wash your face, then, fine. It's not something you can do in the middle of surgery, so you're going to have to be a little more careful about what you do with your mask. But yeah, you're not supposed to touch the mask while you're wearing it. That's true. People can't help but do it anyway, and that's true. And then you do the best you can by sanitizing your hands, washing your hands if you have soap and water available, and try not to touch your face. And in the meantime, if you've contaminated something, do you just go, the hell with it, I'm going to take this mask off? Or do you continue to filter out 10, 15, 25% of the aerosols with the virus in it that you might be exposed to? Why breathe in 100% when you can get away with just 75? I think. I really don't know what it is that makes people unable to understand the benefit of that. But now, if they need something from Science Daily, or maybe they're Texans and they just want to hear from Texas A&M about this stuff, you can hand them this. All right. More examples. Oh, maybe we'll make this transition. More examples of idiocy, and idiocy in particular among the law enforcement community, this time inflicting damage only on himself, so that's good news. The Washington Post carried the story, perhaps you saw yesterday, of a Republican sheriff from Arizona who vowed not to enforce Arizona's coronavirus restrictions has tested positive for coronavirus. What a surprise. I believe his team is out there spinning this furiously saying that, well, he only has mild symptoms. And in fact, most of the symptoms in Arizona that people who are coming down with coronavirus have been mild. Of course, that's kind of been the case everywhere, but then also some people die from it. And if you've only had it for a couple of days, maybe your symptoms are mild. Call back later, I guess. And also remember to check back in every couple of years about any lasting lung damage. But maybe you get away with it on this one. The real point was that you said you weren't going to get it, and then you did, and you're very dumb. Timothy Bella reporting for Washington Post on this one. As the rest of Arizona followed a stay-at-home order imposed by the governor in May, Pinal County Sheriff, and I think that now reminds me that Greg must have brought this up too, right? He was asking, is that how it's pronounced? The Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb proclaimed that the state's attempt to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus was unconstitutional. You know how they pronounce that. The numbers just don't justify the actions anymore. The defiant Republican sheriff told the Arizona Republic at the time, vowing not to arrest people or shut down businesses that violated the order. 300 deaths is not a significant enough number to continue to ruin the economy. Well, anyway, now he's got it, and just maybe we'll check up now on what's going on over in Arizona, because things have been heating up for them there. 300 deaths is not enough. How about 4 times as many? Because that's where you're sitting right now. And you may be next, now that you have the virus as well. Although you look like a young-ish and healthy sort of person. Not young, but he's not 75 plus, let's say. And chances are pretty good. But then again, I remind you that for whatever reason, we're still sitting at about 1 in every 20 people who contract the virus ends up dying, and now you are one of any group of 20 who have contracted it, and I guess you can look around and pick which one of the other 19 of you is more likely to die than you with your big dumb hat on. You tell me. All right. Speaking of now making the transition, I think you can see the arc that we'll be pursuing here. TPM has this story. To add to those that we shared with you yesterday, police found tactical manual for Minutemen group after arresting armed men at protest. Another situation where violence was threatened or people showed up armed at one of the protests, and it was not any of the so-called Antifa or violent ultra-left or even center-right oriented, let's say, black protesters. Once again, right-wing and white, and a particular kind of right-wing and white. Following the apprehension of armed men at a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Troy, New York last week, Matt Shuhem reports for TPM, authorities say they found weapons, fireworks, ammunition, and a tactical manual from a regional Minuteman group in vehicles belonging to the armed crew. That's a gang, an armed crew. Initially, the entire 8-person crew was detained at the protest. 2 were subsequently charged, and the investigation is ongoing, according to the Rensselaer County District Attorney's Office. At the protest that Sunday, police tracked the men as they walked through the protest crowd, then followed them back to the parking lot. So I guess they lost their nerve during the protest, but whatever. Law enforcement found a tactical manual tying the group to the New England Minutemen militia group, the original Minutemen, I suppose, in one way of thinking about it, in the vehicles the men brought to the protest, according to a statement from Rensselaer County District Attorney Mary Pat Donnelly's office. The manual was eye-opening to read. Gotta have your eyes open to read it, I'm sure of that. Troy's Deputy Police Chief Dan DeWolf told the Times-Union. One of the men charged a soldier at Fort Drum, which I think is, by the way, one of the forts that might be on the block for having its name changed, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, let's see. I thought I would take a look at some of the original reporting that they're pointing to in this from the local papers, the Times-Union, but I think I'll stick with TPM on this one. So one of the men charged, a soldier at Fort Drum, again, a military connection, faces 1 count of criminal possession of a firearm in the 2nd degree. Noah Latham was allegedly carrying a loaded Ghost handgun at the protest, that is, a gun without a serial number, increasingly favored by pro-gun absolutists as a way of skirting regulation. Although I really have never really figured out exactly what they think they're avoiding there. If they get arrested with the gun in their hand, you don't need the serial number to find out who owns it, you know? But I guess if you're selling it, then it makes it more difficult to trace. But of course, if they catch you selling it and are prosecuting you for selling it, it's probably because they saw you do it. Again, the serial number doesn't make a great deal of difference. And it's a quasi-legal thing to do. It's not that they're filing the serial number off of the weapon, which is, of course, illegal. You can do it, but it's illegal. But I think we've read about this on the show, the build parties, right, where you can get parts for the gun you want, and gun manufacturers can sell you the parts without stamping the parts with the serial number. They only have to stamp the finished product with the serial number. And that gives these guys little tickles in their pants, I guess, to have a ghost gun that has no serial number, even though, again, if you're arrested holding it, it's yours. That's all there is to it. Anyway, an arrest report for Latham obtained by TPM describes his occupation as Army UAV operator, likely meaning that he pilots unmanned aerial vehicles or drones. So he's a video game guy. Another man in the group, Nathaniel Shepard, was charged with 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the 2nd degree, 16 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the 3rd degree, and 1 count of criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree. How many degrees are there? And I guess the serial numbers don't matter much to any of those either. Police found 2 assault rifles and scores of ammunition in his vehicle, according to the scores of ammunition. Well, okay, scores of rounds of ammunition. Don't say that. You said clip. It's invalid. The whole thing goes down the tubes now. This all according to the complaint against Shepard. He also allegedly carried a billy club openly during the protest, a misdemeanor. The Times Union, it's a misdemeanor unless you've got qualified immunity as a cop. But okay. The Times Union noted that a group by the same name as the one cited by the prosecutors, New England Minutemen, or NEMM, is featured in a YouTube video showing purported members of the group doing various military-style drills. Cosplay, as you know. Elsewhere on the web, an Instagram account purporting to belong to a member of the group features several references to the Boogaloo, meaning armed conflict with the government, that has become popular among the extremists on the internet. And here's a screen cap of those things. The Boogaloo and You. It is entitled, How Fun. But it hasn't stayed on the web. Boogaloo supporters have flaunted their beliefs publicly at protests recently, and some have resorted to violence. 2 men allegedly involved in the Boogaloo movement were charged federally Tuesday with the murder of a Federal Protective Services officer in Oakland. That's the one we talked about yesterday. One of them was also charged with the murder of a sheriff's deputy a week after the Oakland killing. 3 men in Nevada faced charges over alleged plans they had to use the Black Lives Matter protests as cover for violence. 3 of the men in the Troy protest group were from out of state, according to Donnelly's office. So they're out-of-state agitators, right? Out-of-town agitators. What do you know? Outside agitators. That's the terminology, right? During the protest, the men wore body armor and bulletproof vests, and some carried loaded guns, 2-way radios, they're the best kind, really, and batons, according to the statement. If you're just carrying a 1-way radio, you are just listening to music and marching around armed, and I guess that's okay. Although, really, honestly, I've never really understood why. The way cops crack down on things, the fact that they haven't used their ability to crack down on people who show up in armor is surprising to me. Both the makeshift armor that right-wing lunatics and Proud Boys and the like to wear to rallies anticipating getting in fights, and body armor also. But I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's part of our problem. Have we ever tested this? Is there case law on your ability to wear body armor on the street? I suppose that would be the sort of thing that a court might sustain, because it can't kill you, body armor, but it is usually indicative of somebody who's maybe up to no good, as opposed to simply saying, I just want to be as bulletproof as possible at all times. Maybe that's not sort of a reasonable stance, but I don't know. I've never really looked into it, but it always seemed to me like if they can stop you for a tail light that's out, they should be able to stop you for wearing body armor at any time, but maybe we'll relate it to the coronavirus here. In hot weather. What are you doing wearing so much body armor in hot weather? We all remember one of the recent videos of an annoying white person bothering a minority person for wearing black in the California heat, right? So why can't you stop people for wearing body armor? You can. They just don't. Anyway, though it's not clear how or if Shepard and Latham are members of the Minutemen group, their lawyer didn't return TPM's request for comment. That's why we don't know. It would be just the latest in a pattern of armed groups showing up at Black Lives Matter protests. Upon his arrest at the protest, Latham reportedly told police he was there to, quote, keep the peace. And I guess the peace got kept, though just not by him. They walked, and then they went back to their car, and then they got arrested. Okay, but prosecutors say the group's intentions still aren't clear. The decision of these individuals to attend the rally with loaded firearms, protective gear, fireworks, and two-way radios leaves open questions as to their intentions, Donnelly, the district attorney, said in a statement. Local station 7 News reported that it spoke to Latham for a February story about a proposal to make Jefferson County a sanctuary for the Second Amendment. What a story. We want to restore the Constitution and the Second Amendment as best we can because a lot of us feel that it has really been infringed upon by the SAFE Act and a lot of the new proposed laws, which of course can't infringe on anything because they're just proposed laws, but whatever. This is what he told the station at the time, referring to New York's Secure Ammunition and Firearms Enforcement Act. That is to say, lock up your guns. Right, so the kids don't find them. What an infringement! The station noted Facebook posts from Latham that were critical of the police, so maybe he's there to protest that. That's one of the crossovers there. So you're just going to use police brutality on protesters against police brutality at the police brutality protest, he wrote recently. Latham also called for police jobs to require a 4-year criminal justice degree, the station noted, which isn't a terrible idea all by itself. But interesting crossover there, and I guess that's their excuse for showing up, and it might even be a valid one. These guys don't like intrusive police or abusive police either. They think that they're the victims of these things as often as not, and again, you can explore on your own if you've never heard us do this, or look for previous episodes of the podcast for our discussions of how full YouTube is of open gun carriers filming their victimization at the hands of overzealous police, which usually involves police walking up to them and saying, "How you doing, sir?" "Fine, officer. How are you?" "I notice you're carrying a weapon." "Yes." "Do you have a permit for that weapon?" "I don't have to tell you." "All right, that's true. I was just checking. What's your purpose for being here today?" "I don't have to tell you." "Yes, we know." And whatever else. And it goes on for some time, and then they walk away and say, "See how tyrannical the police can really be." So, it's a little bit of a come down from the reasons that other people might be there at the protests for, but they do believe they're being victimized left and right at all of this. But what can you do? You're not going to convince them to pay attention to other people's problems when they're wrapped up in making their ghost guns. All right, nearly time to wrap things up and hand it over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but we do have another 5 minutes or so that we might use to squeeze in something else, and I guess now I'm scrolling around trying to see what else I can include for you in 5 minutes. Let's see. We've touched on some of those things. Those were long articles that I will remind you, if you didn't get a chance to read over the last couple of days, either the story about the criminal investigations launched by Brian Kemp when he was Secretary of State of Georgia into how did some black women win an election. That an interesting read. We didn't really spend enough time on that to really give you a flavor of just what was going on there, but many of you probably get the idea. And also the interesting story of right-wing and white supremacist infiltration into U.S. police forces that we started on the other day as well. Both worth reading over the weekend, and perhaps you can find those in our recaps from the previous days and give yourself something fun to read on a Friday afternoon. Let's see. Other info that's now buried. I know that there's some things in here, but the way you can mark things in Pocket really leaves a lot to be desired, quite honestly. Maybe I need a new read it later application. But anyway, let's see. There was, trying to find these. Well, let's see. I don't know whether there's. Yes, there was a follow-up. Maybe we can share this one to a Guardian piece that I shared some weeks ago about the joyous reception that Trump's crazy Bible photo op got among the evangelical communities. And it was in the Guardian, and it was written up by Matthew Teague. And now Teague has, not now, but back on June 4th, Teague had a follow-up piece that suggested that the reception was not universally joyous, and I don't know if we ever got to share that one. Trump's Bible photo op splits white evangelical loyalists into two camps. I don't know whether they're of equal size or not, but I thought that was interesting. We missed that. Ardent supporters saw the photo op as a blow against evil, while others saw the gesture as cynical and a ploy. So I'd be interested to know just how many white evangelicals found that to be the case. But back then, reporting that on Monday, that fateful Monday, some weeks ago now, when Donald Trump raised overhead a Bible, the sword of the Spirit, to believers, he unwittingly cleaved his loyal Christian supporters into two camps. His most ardent evangelical supporters saw it as a blow against evil and described his walk from the White House to St. John's Episcopal Church over ground violently cleared of protesters as a Jericho walk, and I can't believe they even have that term. The Reverend Johnny Moore, president of the Congress of Christian Leaders, described Trump in shepherd-like terms on Twitter. They didn't have much to do with Jericho, I don't think, but okay. I will never forget seeing... and then he was doing it on Twitter. So never forget seeing POTUS and real Donald Trump slowly and in total command, walking slowly because he's shuffling, but not because he's in total command, walking from the White House across Lafayette Square to St. John's Church, defying those who aim to derail our national healing. Oh, okay, you get the idea, right? But evangelicals are not monolithic. We knew that, but people do still say that they are. Some saw the gesture as cynical, a ploy by a president whose decisions, both private and public, do not align with biblical principles. Wow. I guess it's a sort of a Rorschach test, then, said Dallas pastor Robert Jeffress, who is one of Trump's most important defenders among the faithful. You see what you expect to see, but that's not true. Really? Trump's emerging evangelical critics say an objective measure is contained in the very book Trump wielded. Well, we do expect them to say that, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the merciful. It's right there in the Sermon on the Mount, said John Fay, a professor of American history at Messiah College. Just read Jesus. Well, it's pretty basic instruction there. Trump's photo opportunity required police to attack and push away protesters against police brutality. He walked surrounded by key civilian and military advisors, some of whom later said they were caught unaware by the stunt and the violence that preceded it. Some evangelical leaders said they felt similarly aghast watching the events unfold. Pelting people with rubber bullets and spraying them with tear gas for peacefully protesting is morally wrong, said Russell Moore, president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now that's, we're not ready for the music actually, but that's genuine white evangelical territory, the Southern Baptist Convention. What we need right now is moral leadership from all of us in the churches, in the police departments, in the courts, and in the White House. And now it's time for the music. Did you know that I have to wait to 45 seconds after the minute strikes there? Not 30 as usual for the breaks. Anyway, the Bible tells us so. So do our own consciences. Today's events left more alarmed, he said. The staunchest of evangelicals, 90-year-old televangelist Pat Robertson, split from Trump on Tuesday. He told television viewers of the president, he said, I'm ready to send in military troops if the nation's governors don't act to quell the violence that has rocked American cities. As a matter of fact, he spoke of them as being jerks. You just don't do that, Mr. President. It isn't cool. Wow. It could be far worse than uncool politically. Trump can't afford to lose evangelicals even by the handful. A record 81% of white evangelicals voted for him in 2016, and he only narrowly won the presidency, sometimes by just a few thousand votes in crucial areas. His gesture with the Bible outside St. John's was meant to shore up that support, reminding his base of a tacit agreement, but I guess it just didn't do the trick. We're going to leave it there. Time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and to you for the weekend, and I hope you enjoy that. But before you go, stick around and hear about what he's got on tap for you. Let's see, there's the Trump administration's sloppiness, handing a Supreme Court victory to the Dreamers. We didn't even get to talk about it except for its breaking news yesterday, so I'm glad that Justice will pick up that mantle next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Lots happening at home and abroad. GOP governors refusing to take any blame for virus spikes after rushing to reopen their states. Facebook and the inverted triangle get some treatment as well. And a lawsuit filed by Black Lives Matter against Bill Barr might finally be the case that John Mitchell's the Trump consigliere. Get it? All next.